I bought a used car from my daughter-in-law's mother, but the GPS had a saved address, simply labelled residence. I figured she'd just forgotten to delete it. Curious, I drove there. The road led to a mountain lookout. An old man was waiting for me. He looked me in the eye and said something that would change my life forever. But before I get to that moment, I need to tell you who I was, because the woman who drove up that mountain wasn't the same woman who drove back down. My name is Eleanor. I'm 63 years old, and for the past 5 years, I'd been a shadow of myself. I don't know exactly when I stopped living. Maybe it was the day I buried my husband. Or maybe it was after, when I realized the house was still silent, even when I was screaming on the inside. The truth is, it doesn't matter when it started. What matters is that I reached a point where waking up and going to sleep felt exactly the same. Empty, automatic, meaningless. My days were all alike. I'd wake up at 6 in the morning without an alarm because my body had forgotten how to sleep peacefully. I'd make coffee just for myself. I'd drink my cup in the same chair, looking at the same wall. Then came breakfast. After that, the television. Shows I didn't care about. Voices of people I didn't know filling the silence I was afraid to face. In the afternoons, I would sometimes go to the supermarket. I bought the same things. I greeted the same people. I came back home. And just like that, day after day, life was slipping through my fingers like sand. My children called on Sundays. They always asked the same thing. "How are you, Mum?" And I always gave the same answer. "Fine, sweetie, just hanging in there." But the truth was, I wasn't going anywhere. I was stuck, frozen in time, as if my life had ended the day he left, and I simply hadn't realized it yet. Sometimes I'd look in the mirror and not recognize the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were tired. Her mouth had forgotten how to truly smile. That woman was me, but at the same time, she wasn't. It was what was left of me after so much time of just existing. I didn't have close friends. Well, I had acquaintances, people I exchanged hellos with on the street or at church, but no one who really knew me. No one I could call at 3 o'clock in the morning and tell that I felt lost. I had stopped cultivating friendships years ago. First, because taking care of my sick husband consumed all my time. Then, because I simply didn't have the energy. And later, because I got used to the solitude. I became an expert at it. So much so that it started to feel more comfortable than company. My daughter-in-law Marilyn was one of the few people who still tried to reach out. She came to visit every 2 weeks, always with an excuse. "I was passing by and thought I'd drop off these cookies," or "I was nearby and wanted to check in on you." I knew she wasn't passing by coincidentally. I knew she came because she was worried about me. And even though I never told her, I thanked her in silence. Marilyn had that rare ability to be present without invading, to worry without judging. She was a good kid, better than my son deserved, to be honest. It was Marilyn who told me about the car. One afternoon in April, she came to my house with that look you get when you have something important to say but don't know how to start. We sat in the living room. "Brace yourself." And after a few minutes of small talk, she dropped the news. Her mother, Elizabeth, had passed away 3 weeks earlier. Cancer, quick and ruthless, as those things usually are. I had barely known her. We'd met a couple of times at family gatherings, exchanged courteous words, but nothing more. She was a quiet, elegant woman, always with a deep sadness in her eyes that I didn't know the source of. Marilyn told me they were selling her mother's things, the house, the furniture, the car, and that she had thought of me when she saw the car, because she knew I needed one. Mine had died 6 months ago, And since then, I had been relying on taxis or asking my children for rides, which I hated. I didn't like being a burden. I didn't like needing anyone. Marilyn offered me the car at a ridiculously low price. $3,000 for a vehicle that was worth at least $10,000. It was Mum's car, she told me. I want it to go to someone who will take care of it. Someone in the family. I accepted without much thought. I needed a car, and the price was impossible to turn down. But more than that, I think I accepted because it was easier to say yes than to explain why not. We signed the papers that same week. Marilyn handed me the keys with a sad smile. Mum took really good care of it, she said. I hope it serves you well. I nodded. I thanked her. And I went home with a car that still smelled of a dead woman's perfume. The first few days, I only used it for the basics. Going to the supermarket, the pharmacy, church on Sundays. It was a good car. A comfortable, quiet grey sedan. It had integrated GPS, something my old car never had. At first, I didn't pay attention to it. I wasn't going anywhere new that required navigation. But one afternoon, while waiting in the bank parking lot, I started playing with the buttons. Bored curiosity. Nothing more. I turned on the GPS and started checking the functions. And that's when I saw it. There was a saved address. Only one. It was called Residence. I thought it was Elizabeth's house, that she had simply saved her own address for some reason. Older folks do those things sometimes. We save redundant information just in case. But something felt strange to me. Why call it residence and not home or house? The word sounded formal, distant, as if it wasn't a place where you really lived, but a place you went. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that address, about why it was there, about what it meant. I told myself it was silly, that it didn't matter, that Elizabeth had probably saved it years ago and forgot to delete it. But my mind couldn't let it go, because deep down, I think I needed a mystery, something to break the monotony, something to make me feel curious again. And that address, so simple and so strange at the same time, was exactly that. The next day, I found myself looking up the address online. I copied the GPS coordinates and pasted them into the map. The location appeared in the middle of nowhere. A mountain road, 2 hours outside of Denver. No buildings marked nearby. No clear references. Just a dot on the map surrounded by green. An overlook, maybe. Or an abandoned place. It made no sense. Why would Elizabeth have an address like that saved? What was up there that deserved such a specific name? 3 days passed. 3 days where I couldn't think about anything else. I'd catch myself looking at the car keys, imagining myself driving up that mountain, wondering what I would find at the end of the road. I felt ridiculous. A 63-year-old woman obsessed with an address on a GPS. But at the same time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Something like excitement, like anticipation. As if a secret was waiting for me, and only I had the key to discover it. On the morning of the 4th day, I made a decision. I was going to go. I had nothing to lose. No one was waiting for me at home. I had no plans, no reason to stay. And maybe, just maybe, that place held answers. Or maybe it held nothing. But either way, I needed to know. I needed to follow that curiosity to the end. Because if I didn't, I knew I would regret it. And I already had enough regrets in my life to add one more to the list I carried in silence. I left early that morning, before I could change my mind, before reason could convince me it was crazy. I dressed in comfortable clothes, filled a bottle of water, grabbed the keys, and left the house without looking back. The GPS was already on, The residence address was blinking on the screen like an invitation, or a warning. I wasn't sure which one. The first streets were familiar. I passed by places I knew. The bakery where I bought bagels on Saturdays. The park where I used to walk with my husband. The school where my children had studied decades ago. But as I drove further from the city centre, everything started to feel strange. The houses became farther apart. The buildings disappeared. The trees multiplied. And suddenly I was on a highway I had never seen before. The GPS guided me with that calm, robotic voice. "Continue for 3 miles. Turn right. Keep on this road." I obeyed without thinking. My hands on the wheel, my eyes on the road. My mind in a place between fear and curiosity. I didn't know what I expected to find. Part of me thought I would arrive at an empty house, or an abandoned place with no story. But another part, the part that had kept me awake for 3 nights, knew there was something more. The road began to climb, sharp curves, trees so tall they blocked the sun. The air became cooler, cleaner. I could smell pine and damp earth. It had been years since I had left the city like this, years since I had ventured beyond my small circle of security. And now I was here, climbing a mountain for an address that a dead woman had saved on her GPS. If someone had told me a week ago that I would do this, I would have laughed, or thought I was losing my mind. An hour passed, then another. The road became narrower and narrower, more solitary. There were no other cars, no houses, just the road winding through the trees and the sound of the engine filling the silence. I started to doubt, to wonder if I should turn back. But something inside me said to keep going, that I had already come so far, that going back would be worse than continuing. "You have arrived at your destination." The GPS voice startled me. I looked up and saw that the road ended in a small dirt clearing. There was space to park 3 or 4 cars, but the place was completely empty. To one side, a stone path led toward what looked like an overlook. I could see a wooden railing in the distance, and beyond that, the open sky. I turned off the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. I sat in the car for a moment, breathing, trying to calm the nerves that suddenly overcame me. What was I doing here? What did I expect to find? But there was no turning back now. I had driven 2 hours to get to this place. I couldn't leave without at least seeing what was there. I opened the door and got out. The cold mountain air hit my face. I wrapped my sweater tighter around me and walked toward the path. My steps crunched on the loose stones. The wind moved the branches of the trees, creating a constant murmur. As I approached the overlook, the landscape opened up before me. Mountains stretching as far as the eye could see. Deep valleys covered in green. A sky so vast it made me feel small and insignificant. But it wasn't the landscape that took my breath away. It was the man standing next to the railing. An old man. He must have been close to 80 years old. He was facing away from me, looking at the horizon. He was wearing a worn brown sweater and dark pants. His hair was completely white. And there was something in the way he stood, so still, so patient, that made me think he had been waiting for a long time. I took another step, then another. My feet seemed to move on their own. And when I was a few yards away, he turned around, as if he had sensed my presence. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I knew this was no coincidence. I knew that this man knew exactly who I was, or at least, he knew why I was there. "You came," he said. His voice was soft, hoarse with age, but full of contained emotion. I stood frozen. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I just stared at him, trying to understand what was happening. He took a step toward me. His eyes were moist. "I thought no one would," he said. "I thought the message would be lost, but you came." "I don't understand," I finally managed to say. My voice sounded small, shaky. "Who are you? Why are you here? What message?" The old man smiled, a sad smile that carried decades of pain. "The car you're driving," he said. "It was Elizabeth's." I nodded slowly. "Yes, she was my daughter-in-law's mother. She passed away about a month ago." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if those words physically hurt him. "I know," he murmured. "I knew the moment she stopped coming." My mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. "You knew her," I said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He nodded. "I knew her my whole life, since we were children, and I loved her every day of those years, even when she wasn't around, even when I thought I would never see her again." There was something in the way he said it that broke my heart. I could feel the weight of those words, the pain of a lifetime of waiting. "Why did she leave the address on the GPS?" I asked. The old man turned back toward the horizon. "Because Elizabeth knew someone would find it. Someone curious. Someone who couldn't leave a mystery unsolved. She told me once that if anything happened to her, she would leave a clue, so I would know she never forgot me. So someone would come and tell me she thought of me until the end." I felt a lump in my throat. I didn't know him. I didn't know his story. But I could feel the enormity of what I was hearing. This man had been waiting here, waiting for a sign, waiting for someone to follow the trail Elizabeth had left. And I had been that person. I had followed my curiosity to this place. And now I was standing in front of a love that had survived decades of separation. "What is your name?" I asked softly. He looked at me with those tired but life-filled eyes. "Robert," he said. "My name is Robert, and you must be someone special to have followed that path. Not many people would have done it." I shook my head. "I'm not special. I'm just a bored old woman who had nothing better to do." He smiled again. "That's what we all say when we do something brave. But the truth is, coming here took courage, more than you think." We stood in silence for a moment, two strangers united by the last wish of a woman who was no longer there. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to process all of this. But I felt something changing inside me. Something that had been asleep for years was beginning to wake up. And it had all started with a simple address on a GPS, with a mystery I couldn't ignore, with a curiosity that brought me here. "Tell me," I said. "I want to know who Elizabeth was to you. I want to understand why this place was so important." Robert took a deep breath, and with a voice that trembled between memory and pain, he began to speak. And I, a woman who had stopped listening to stories years ago, stood there, listening to every word, feeling every emotion, living every moment of a love that never died. "I met Elizabeth when we were 8 years old," Robert began. His voice softened as he spoke, as if every word were a treasure kept for too long. "We were neighbors. Our houses were right next to each other in a small town 2 hours from here. She was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. She had long, dark hair, always pulled back in a braid. And those eyes. God, those eyes could look straight into your soul." He paused for a moment, lost in the memory. I didn't say anything. I just waited. The wind moved his white hair, and he seemed to be seeing something I couldn't see, something that existed only in his memory. "We were inseparable," he continued. "We played together every day. We grew up together. And when we turned 16, I knew I loved her. Not the way a boy loves, but the way a man loves a woman. Completely. Without reservations. Without doubts. And she, I asked softly, did she love you? Robert nodded with a smile that was pure pain and pure joy at the same time. Yes, she told me in this exact spot. We were 17 years old. I brought her here on my old motorcycle. We climbed the mountain at sunset, and when we got to this overlook, she took my hand and told me she wanted to spend the rest of her life with me, that no matter what happened, it would always be the two of us. What happened then? I asked, even though I already knew the answer would be painful. Robert clenched his jaw. Our families happened. My family was poor, very poor. I worked on the farm with my father. We barely had enough to eat. Elizabeth's family was different. Her father owned land. They had money. They had a name. And when we secretly got engaged, when I asked her to marry me, everything fell apart. He moved away from the railing and walked a few steps. I followed him in silence. Her father found out, he continued. I don't know how, but he knew. And he came to my house one night. He told my father that if I kept seeing Elizabeth, he would take away the land we rented. He would leave us on the street. My father begged me to leave her. He told me I couldn't ruin the whole family for a young love, that there would be other women, that in time I would forget her. But you didn't forget her, I said. Robert laughed without humor. How could I? I tried to stay away. I stopped looking for her. I stopped going to the places where I knew she would be. But the pain was unbearable, and she was suffering too. I found out later that she cried every night, that she stopped eating, that her father had to take her to the doctor because she was sick with sadness. 3 months later, Elizabeth found me. She found me working in the fields. She told me she couldn't take it anymore, that she would die if we weren't together. And I, God forgive me, I was weak. I loved her too much to let her go. So we started seeing each other in secret. Here, in this place. It was our refuge, our separate world. We climbed the mountain whenever we could, sometimes just for an hour. Sometimes we stayed until sunrise. And at this overlook, we were free. It was only us. How long did that last? I asked. Robert looked at the sky. 2 years. 2 stolen years. 2 years of lies and hiding and constant fear. But they were also the 2 happiest years of my life. Because I had her. Even if it was in secret. Even if it was only in this place. I had her. And that was enough. But it didn't last forever, I said quietly. He shook his head. No. One afternoon, Elizabeth's brother followed us. He found us here. He told their father. And this time, her father didn't come to threaten me. He simply took Elizabeth away. He sent her to live with some aunts and uncles in another city. He took her away from me overnight. No goodbyes, no explanations. One time she was here, and the next she had disappeared. I felt my heart clench. You couldn't contact her? Robert wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I tried. I wrote letters. They all came back unopened. I went to the city where she was. Her uncle chased me away with a shotgun. They told me that if I ever came near her again, they would put me in jail, that they would invent something if they had to, that I had to forget her and get on with my life. But you kept coming here, I said, looking around the empty overlook. Robert nodded. Every week. For 40 years. I came here every Sunday. At first I came because I hoped she would come back, because I thought she would find a way to return to me. But months passed, then years, and she never came back. I found out she had gotten married, that she had children, that she had built a life without me. "You didn't get married?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He slowly shook his head. "I couldn't. I tried dating other women. My family pressured me. My friends told me I was a fool, that I was wasting my life waiting for someone who would never return. And they were right. I was a fool. But I couldn't help it. Because every time I tried to kiss another woman, I saw Elizabeth's face. Every time I tried to love someone else, my heart reminded me that it already belonged to her." "So you kept coming here," I said. Robert smiled sadly. "Yes, it changed from hope to ritual. I no longer came expecting to see her. I came because this was the only place where I could still feel close to her, where the memories were so strong I could almost hear her laugh. I could almost feel her hand in mine. This place became my church, my confession, my refuge." We were silent. I didn't know what to say in the face of so much pain, in the face of a lifetime dedicated to an impossible love. Robert walked back to the railing and looked out over the valley. "6 months ago," he said, "something extraordinary happened. I was here one Sunday morning as usual, and I heard a car coming up the road. I didn't pay attention to it. Sometimes hikers come up, but when the car parked and the door opened, I saw her. It was Elizabeth. After 40 years, she was standing there, looking at me, and I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe." "She came back," I whispered. Robert nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. "She walked toward me. She was no longer the 17-year-old girl I had loved. She was an older woman, with grey hair, with wrinkles. But her eyes were still the same. And when she spoke to me, it was as if not a single day had passed. 'Robert,' she said, 'forgive me for taking so long. Forgive me for not being braver.' I hugged her. I hugged her like I had dreamed of doing for 40 years. And we cried. We both cried like children. All the unspoken words. All the lives we didn't live together. All the lost time. It all came out in that embrace. She told me she never stopped loving me, that she thought of me every day of her life, that her marriage had been arranged, that she had been a good wife and a good mother, but her heart was never her husband's. It was always mine." "Why did she come back after so long?" I asked. Robert took a deep breath. "Because she was sick. Cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months, and she decided she couldn't die without seeing me one last time, without telling me she always loved me, without saying goodbye in this place where everything began. We came here every week after that," Robert continued, his voice breaking. "Every Sunday, like we used to when we were young. She drove from the city. I drove up in my old pickup truck. And we met here, in our spot. We talked for hours, about everything we had lived separately, about the children she had, about the jobs had held, about the dreams that never came true, about the life that should have been ours." He sat down on the ground near the railing. I followed him, sitting down next to him. The wind blew softly and the sun began to set on the horizon. "We didn't have much time," Robert said. "We knew it. Every week that passed, she was weaker, paler. The cancer was consuming her. But she never missed a day, not a single Sunday, even when she could barely walk, even when the pain was terrible. She came, because these moments were all we had." I asked her if she regretted her life, marrying another man, not fighting harder for us. She looked at me with those tired eyes and told me no, that she had loved her children, that she had found purpose in being a mother, but that if she could go back, if she could choose again, she would have chosen me without hesitation. And that, in a strange way, gave me peace. knowing that I wasn't the only one who carried this love all these years. The last time we saw each other was 2 months ago, Robert continued. She was very ill. She could barely breathe. I told her not to come anymore, to stay home, to rest, but she insisted. She told me she needed to see me one last time, that she needed to say goodbye here, in the place where everything began. So she came. Her daughter Marilyn drove her in the car. She helped her get out and left us alone for an hour. Marilyn knew? I asked, surprised. Robert nodded. Elizabeth told her everything. She told her our story. She told her I had been the love of her life. Marilyn cried when she found out. She cried for her mother, for me, for all the time we lost. But she understood, and she was generous enough to give us that last moment together. We sat here, Robert said, pointing to the exact spot where we were. Elizabeth rested her head on my shoulder. I held her, and we stayed like that, in silence, watching the sunset. We didn't need words. We had talked enough during those 6 months. We had already said everything. We just wanted to be together, to feel each other's presence, to memorize that moment, because we knew it would be the last. When the sun set completely, she lifted her head. She looked into my eyes, and she told me something I will never forget. Robert, she said, I'm leaving, but I want you to know that these last months were the greatest gift of my life. You gave me more love in 6 months than I received in 40 years. And even though we couldn't have the life we dreamed of, we had this. We had this place. We had these moments. And that's enough. I told her I loved her, that I would love her until my last breath, that when I died, my soul would come looking for her, and we would finally be together, with no one able to separate us. She smiled, that sad smile she always had, and she kissed me. A long kiss, deep. A kiss that tasted of goodbye and promise at the same time. Then she told me something strange. She told me she had left a clue, a sign, that someone would eventually come. Someone who would find the saved address on her GPS, and that person would bring me a message. I didn't understand at the time. I didn't pay attention to it. I just thought it was the pain talking, that the medicine was confusing her. But I played along. I told her I would wait, that I would be here every Sunday, as always. Waiting, Marilyn came back for her. She helped her walk to the car. Elizabeth turned around one last time, looked at me, and raised her hand in a wave goodbye. I raised mine too, and that's how we said goodbye. Without yelling, without drama. Just 2 people who loved each other their whole lives finally letting go. She died 3 weeks later. Robert wiped his tears. I didn't go to the funeral. I wasn't invited. And I wouldn't have gone, even if I had been invited. I didn't want to see her in a casket. I didn't want that to be my last memory of her. I preferred to remember her here, alive, smiling, with her head on my shoulder, watching the sunset. But I kept coming every Sunday, because I had promised her I would be here, and because in some way I felt like she was still visiting me, that her spirit was in this place, in the wind, in the trees, in the silence. And then today, when I saw that grey car come up the road, the car I knew so well, I knew it was the sign. I knew you were the person Elizabeth had mentioned. He looked directly into my eyes, and you came. I don't know who you are. I don't know why you decided to follow that address, but you came. And that means Elizabeth kept her promise. She left a trail for someone to find me, for someone to tell me she thought of me until the end, so I would know I wasn't crazy waiting here all these years, that what we felt was real, that our love mattered. I felt tears running down my cheeks. I didn't know what to say. Robert and Elizabeth's story was devastating. It was beautiful and tragic at the same time. And I had been the messenger without knowing it. I had followed my curiosity to this place and had found a love that survived decades of separation. A love that neither distance nor time nor death could destroy. "She loved you," I finally said, my voice barely a whisper. "She loved you until the end, and she wanted you to know that." Robert nodded. He closed his eyes. And for the first time since I met him, I saw peace on his face. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing me to tell this story. I've carried it alone for so long that sometimes I thought I would go crazy." We stayed sitting there as night began to fall. Two strangers who were no longer strangers. United by the last wish of a woman who had loved with all her being. I thought about my own life, about my own solitude, about the 5 years I had wasted just existing. And I realized that Elizabeth hadn't just left a message for Robert. She had left one for me too. She had shown me that true love exists, that it's worth the risk, that it's worth feeling, that a life without love is not really life, and that it's never too late. Elizabeth had been 62 years old when she went back to look for Robert. 62 years old and with only months to live. But she did it. She had the courage to follow her heart one last time, and those 6 months were enough. They were everything. "Robert," I said softly. He looked at me. "Thank you for sharing your story with me. You've taught me something I had forgotten, something I had buried along with my husband. You've reminded me that I'm still alive, that I can still feel, that I can still choose to truly live instead of just existing." He smiled. "Then Elizabeth left a message for you too, not just for me, for you." That night, I drove back home in complete silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want any noise to interrupt the thoughts swirling in my head. Robert and Elizabeth's story had stirred something deep within me, something I thought was dead. I got home a little after 12 minutes past midnight. I went inside. I closed the door. And for the first time in 5 years, the solitude didn't feel comfortable. It felt wrong. It felt like a choice I had been making without realizing it. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Elizabeth, how she had lived 40 years with a hidden love in her heart, how she had been a good wife and a good mother, but never complete. And I thought about Robert, how he had waited his whole life, how he had chosen solitude rather than loving someone who wasn't her. And I wondered what was worse, living half-heartedly like Elizabeth, or not living at all like Robert. But then I thought about those last 6 months they had together, how Elizabeth had found the courage to come back, to look for him, to tell him the truth before she died. And I realized that had been her redemption, her way of closing the circle, of not leaving this world with that love trapped inside. She had been brave, braver than I had been in years. The next morning I woke up different. I couldn't exactly explain what had changed, but something in me had shifted. I made coffee as always, but instead of sitting in my chair staring at the wall, I went out to the patio. I hadn't done that in months. The garden was neglected, the plants half dead, but the sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the fresh air filled my lungs in a way that made me feel alive. I spent the day cleaning, pulling weeds, watering the plants that could still be saved. I worked until my back hurt and my hands were dirty with soil. But I felt good. I felt useful. I felt present. When I finished, I sat on the front step and looked at my work. It wasn't much, just a half-rescued garden, but it was something. It was a beginning. The following Sunday, I did something I hadn't planned. I took the car keys, and I drove back to the mountain. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I felt like the story wasn't over. Or maybe because I wanted to see Robert again, to make sure he was okay. When I got to the overlook, he was there, in the same spot, as if he had never moved. "You came back," he said when he saw me. He didn't seem surprised, just happy. I walked up to him and stood by his side. "Yes," I said. "I came back. I wasn't sure why, but I felt like I should." Robert nodded, looking at the horizon. Sometimes places call to us, or people, or stories that haven't finished being told. We stood in silence for a while. It was a comfortable silence. The kind of silence you can share with someone without feeling the need to fill it with unnecessary words. Finally, I asked him if he came every Sunday. He said yes, that he had come every Sunday for 40 years, and he wasn't going to stop now. "This is my spot," he said, "my sanctuary, the only piece of ground where I feel at peace." "Can I come with you?" I asked. The words came out before I could think them. I don't know where they came from, but the moment I said them, I knew they were right. Robert looked at me, surprised. "You'd like to do that?" he asked. I nodded. "I think so. I think this place is good for me, too. It reminds me that there's more to life than just getting through the days. It reminds me that I can still feel something." Robert smiled. "Then come. Come every Sunday if you want. The company would be good for me. I've been alone here for a long time. It would be nice to share this place with someone." And so it began. Every Sunday I drove the 2 hours to the overlook. Robert was already there waiting. At first we just sat in silence, looking at the scenery, breathing the mountain air. But little by little we started talking. He told me more about his life, about the jobs he had held, the things he had seen, the places he had travelled looking to forget Elizabeth, but never succeeding. He told me about his family, about his parents who died without understanding why their son never married, about his siblings who stopped pressing him after years of rejection. He told me he lived alone in a small house near the town, that his life was simple, quiet, solitary, but not unhappy. I also started to open up. I told him about my husband, about how I had loved him, but not in the passionate way he had loved Elizabeth. My marriage had been good, stable, comfortable, but it never had that intensity, that fire that consumes and transforms. I told him that sometimes I felt guilty about it, for not having loved enough, for having let my husband die without knowing that my heart had always been a little asleep. Robert listened without judging. "Not all loves are like mine and Elizabeth's," he said, "and that doesn't make them any less valid. Love comes in many forms, and the fact that you were there for your husband, that you took care of him, that you gave him a peaceful life, that is also love. Not everyone needs the storm. Sometimes the calm is enough." His words gave me a peace I didn't know I needed. I had carried that guilt for years, that feeling of not having been enough, of not having felt enough. But Robert was right. I had loved in my own way, and that was okay. My love didn't have to be like Elizabeth's to count. I had been me, and that was enough. Weeks passed. Sundays became the part of the week I looked forward to the most. They were no longer just another day. They were the day I felt alive again. The day I had something to anticipate. Something that got me out of the house and reminded me that there was a world out there. A beautiful world. A world worth experiencing. I started noticing changes in myself. Small ones at first. I dressed up more. Not just on Sundays, but every day. I wore clothes I liked instead of the first thing I found. I styled my hair carefully. I put on a little makeup. Not out of vanity, but because I started to care about how I looked again. I started to care about me again. I also started going out more. I went to the farmer's market on Saturdays instead of doing everything in one boring trip to the grocery store. I walked in the park. I sat on the benches and watched people go by. I accepted an invitation from a neighbor to have coffee, something I had rejected dozens of times before. And I discovered that talking to someone wasn't so terrible. Laughing, sharing stories. It was nice. It was necessary. My children noticed the change. My son called me one Tuesday night. "Mum," he said, "you sound different, happier." I told him I was fine, that I had started going out more, that I had met a friend. I didn't tell him who Robert was. I didn't tell him the story. Not yet. That was something private, something just for me, something I wasn't ready to share. But I told him I felt better, that I was finally starting to live again. And it was true. After 5 years of just existing, I was finally living. And it had all started with an address on a GPS, with a mystery I couldn't ignore, with a love story that taught me it's never too late to feel, that it's never too late to choose life over survival, that it's never too late to open your heart again. 3 months passed since that first Sunday at the Overlook. 3 months of increasingly deeper conversations. 3 months of shared silences that said more than 1,000 words. 3 months in which Robert and I became something more than two strangers, united by someone else's story. We became friends, confidants, company amidst two solitudes that had lasted too long. One Sunday, I arrived at the Overlook, and Robert wasn't in his usual spot by the railing. I found him sitting on a rock on the side of the path. He looked tired, older than usual. I approached, worried. "Are you okay?" I asked. He looked up and smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine, Eleanor. Just a little tired. The years weigh more on some days than others." I sat down next to him. For the first time, I noticed how much he had aged. The deep wrinkles around his eyes, the trembling hands, the way he breathed as if it were a struggle. This man had waited his whole life. He had come to this place for 40 years. And now that he had finally had his goodbye with Elizabeth, it seemed his body had decided it could rest. "You know," Robert said after a long silence, "when Elizabeth died, I thought I would go soon too. I thought that without her, without the hope of seeing her again, I would have no reason to continue. But then you arrived, and I realized that maybe there was another reason. Maybe Elizabeth sent someone to me not just to give me her message, but to teach me that life goes on, that there is still beauty in being alive, even at our age, even after everything." His words touched me deeply. I had thought the same thing, that after my husband there was nothing more for me, that my life was already written, and all that was left was to wait for the end. But these 3 months had shown me otherwise. They had taught me that there is always room for new stories, for new connections, for new beginnings, no matter how old we are. Robert looked at me with an intensity I hadn't seen before. "Eleanor," he said, "can I confess something to you?" I nodded. "Of course, anything." He took a deep breath. "I've enjoyed these Sundays more than I can express. When you arrive, this place feels different. It's no longer just the sanctuary of a lost love. It's also a place of hope, of the present, of life. And I've realized that I look forward to Sundays not just out of habit, but because I know you'll be here." I felt something stir in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years, maybe never. It was different from what I felt for my husband. It wasn't the comfort of familiar love. It was something more intense, more present, more real. I look forward to Sundays too, I said quietly. In fact, they are the only thing I look forward to all week. The rest of the days are just time passing until I can come back here, until I can see you again. We looked at each other for a long moment, and in that silence I understood something that both scared and excited me at the same time. I was falling in love, at 63 years old, with a man nearly 80, a man who had loved another woman his whole life, a man who would probably never be able to love me the way he loved Elizabeth. But even so, even knowing all that, my heart had decided to feel again. I didn't say anything that day. I didn't confess what was happening inside me. I was afraid. Afraid of ruining what we had. Afraid that he wouldn't feel the same way. Afraid of being ridiculous. An old woman in love like a teenager. But the feeling didn't go away. It grew. It got stronger every Sunday, every conversation, every time our hands accidentally brushed and I felt electricity run through my skin. A month later, Robert arrived at the Overlook with something in his hands, a small, carved wooden box. He sat down next to me and handed it to me. "This was Elizabeth's," he said. "She gave it to me the last time we saw each other. She told me to keep it until I felt like the time was right. And I think that time is now." I opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a carefully folded letter. The paper was old, the ink slightly faded, but the handwriting was clear, elegant, the handwriting of a woman who knew she was writing her last words. Robert nodded. "Read it. It's for you too." I unfolded the letter and began to read. "Dear Robert, if you are reading this, it's because I'm gone, and it's also because someone followed the clue I left. Someone curious, someone brave, someone who needed to find you as much as you needed to be found. I don't know who that person will be, but I know they will arrive, because the universe is generous with lonely hearts when they are finally ready to open. I want you to know that these last months with you were the greatest gift of my life. You gave me peace, you gave me closure, you gave me the chance to openly love you one last time. And even though I'm leaving happy, because I know I loved you well, and because I know you loved me better. But now I need you to promise me something. I need you to live, truly, not just exist, waiting for me at that Overlook. I need you to open your heart to the possibility of being happy. You don't have to love me less to love someone else. The heart doesn't work that way. Love doesn't run out. It multiplies. And you have so much love to give that it would be a crime for it to die without being shared. To the person reading this alongside Robert, thank you. Thank you for following your curiosity. Thank you for listening to his story. Thank you for giving him company. I know you didn't know me. I know this must seem strange, but I trust that the universe put you in his path for a reason. Maybe he needed your friendship, or maybe you needed his story, or maybe, just maybe, you need each other in ways you don't yet understand. Don't be afraid to feel. Don't be afraid to live. I wasted 40 years being a coward. 40 years when I could have fought harder, when I could have been braver. Don't make my mistake. If there's something you want to say it. If there's something you want to do it. Because time is cruel and unforgiving, and regrets weigh more than any mistake. With love, Elizabeth. Tears streamed down my face when I finished reading. I looked at Robert and saw that he was crying too. We stayed like that for a long time. Two broken people. Two lonely people. Two people who had found comfort in each other's pain. And now we had the blessing of a dead woman to dare to feel something more. Eleanor, Robert said, his voice husky, there's something I need to tell you. I shook my head. No, let me speak first, because if I don't say it now, I never will. And Elizabeth is right. I don't want any more regrets. I took his hand, the old, wrinkled hand of a man who had waited a lifetime. I've fallen in love with you, not the way I loved Elizabeth. That was fire, passion, a storm. This is different. It's softer, quieter, but no less real, no less important. Robert squeezed my hand. Me too, he said. I thought I couldn't love anyone else after her. I thought my heart had been buried with Elizabeth. But you showed me I was wrong. You taught me that the heart can love more than once, in different ways. And that's okay. That it's not a betrayal. It's just life. Life taking its natural course. We leaned toward each other. And there, in the very spot where Elizabeth and Robert had loved each other 40 years ago, we kissed. It wasn't a desperate kiss. It wasn't overflowing passion. It was tenderness. It was understanding. It was two tired souls finding refuge in each other. It was perfect. When we separated, both of us were smiling, shy smiles, like teenagers experiencing their first love. Because in some way, that was exactly what we were. Two older people experiencing something new, something they had never experienced like this, something that was worth every year of waiting, every year of loneliness, every year of pain. What do we do now? I asked. Robert looked at the horizon, that horizon he had looked at for 40 years, waiting for something that had finally arrived. We live, he said simply. We live for all the time we have left, without fear, without guilt. We just live. And that was exactly what we did. The following months were like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Robert and I continued to see each other every Sunday at the Overlook. But now we also saw each other during the week. He came down to the town and we spent the afternoons together. We drank coffee on my patio. We walked in the park. We went to the movies like two kids on their first date. And every moment felt precious. Every moment felt stolen from the time we had wasted being alone. The first time Robert came to my house, he stood in the entrance looking at everything with curiosity. It's a welcoming place, he said. It feels like you, warm, peaceful, full of hidden life waiting to come out. I made coffee, and we sat in the living room. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, about our past lives, about our fears, about our hopes for the time we had left. I told him more about my husband, about how he had been a good man, but distant, about how our marriage had been more of a partnership than a romance. We took care of each other, I told him. We raised our children. We built a stable life. But there was never that spark, that deep connection. And for years I thought that was normal. That was just marriage. But now I realize I was settling. Robert listened without judgment. I don't think you were settling, he said. I think you were doing the best you could with what you had. Not everyone receives the same kind of love. And not everyone knows something different exists until they experience it. You were a good wife, a good mother. That counts. That matters. And now you are having a second chance. Not many people are that lucky. He was right. Not many people our age get a second chance at love. Most resign themselves, settle into loneliness or dead marriages. But we had found something different, something unexpected, and we weren't going to waste a second of it. I started introducing him to my neighbours, at first with some embarrassment. I didn't know how to explain who he was. My boyfriend sounded ridiculous at 63. My friend sounded too casual for what we felt. In the end, I simply said, "This is Robert, and let them draw their own conclusions. Most smiled knowingly, some were surprised, but no one judged, or if they did, I didn't care. One afternoon, Marilyn came to visit without calling. She knocked on the door just as Robert and I were on the patio. I opened it, and her face showed surprise at seeing an unfamiliar man in my house. "Marilyn," I said, "there's someone I want you to meet." We walked to the patio. Robert stood up, and when Marilyn saw him, her face changed. First confusion, then recognition, then tears. "You're Robert," she said, her voice breaking. "My mother's Robert." He nodded. "I am, and you must be Marilyn. Your mother spoke highly of you. She told me you were a good daughter, that you took care of her until the end." Marilyn put her hands over her mouth. "I can't believe you're together. My mother, she wanted this. She planned the whole thing." The three of us sat down, and I told them the whole story. How I had found the address on the GPS, how I had driven up the mountain, how I met Robert and heard his story, how we had started seeing each other every Sunday, and how we had eventually fallen in love. Marilyn cried as she listened. When I finished, she stood up and hugged Robert. "Thank you," she told him. "Thank you for making my mother happy in her last months. Thank you for loving her the way she deserved. And thank you for allowing Eleanor to be a part of this. My mother would have been so happy to know you found each other, that her story had this ending." Robert was crying too. "Your mother was the love of my life," he said. "But Eleanor is my second chance, and I'm going to honor them both by loving her well." After that afternoon, Marilyn became our biggest ally. She invited us to dinner with her and my son. At first, my son was confused, uncomfortable even. "Mum," he told me privately, "are you sure about this? Are you happy?" I looked him in the eyes. "Happier than I've been in years, sweetie. Robert makes me feel alive again. He makes me remember that there's still time to experience new things, to feel things I thought I wouldn't feel anymore." My son took a deep breath. "Then I'm happy for you, Mum. You deserve to be happy. And if he makes you happy, then he has my blessing." Those words meant more than he could ever imagine. I didn't need his permission, but I did need to know that he understood, that he supported me, that he wasn't judging me for choosing to live again instead of getting trapped in the past. Sundays at the Overlook became sacred. We no longer went just to remember. We went to create new memories. We took food. We stayed for hours talking, planning small trips we wanted to take, places we wanted to visit, things we wanted to experience together. We weren't 20 years old. We didn't have the energy of youth. But we had something better. We had the wisdom of knowing that time was precious, that every moment counted. One afternoon, as we watched the sunset from our favorite spot, Robert took my hand. "Eleanor," he said, "I've been thinking about something. I want you to move in with me, or I'll move in with you. I don't want to keep wasting days. I want to wake up next to you. I want to have coffee with you every morning. I want to share my life with you for all the time we have left." My heart raced. It was a terrifying proposition. Living together, at our age, with our ingrained habits, with our quirks. But it was also exciting. It was the promise of not being alone anymore, of having constant company, of building something together in the time we had left. "Yes," I said without much thought. "Yes, I want to. I want to wake up next to you. I want to share my life with you." We decided he would move into my house. It was bigger, more comfortable, and it was in the town where I had all my things, my doctors, my familiar places. Robert had no problem with that. He had lived alone for decades. Any place would be better if I was there. We started making plans, imagining what our life together would be like. and every plan filled me with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. My children reacted differently. My oldest son was happy for me. My youngest daughter was skeptical. "Mum," she told me over the phone, "you barely know him. What if he turns out to be different when you live together? What if it doesn't work?" I told her it was a risk I was willing to take, that I had spent 5 years not risking anything, 5 years in a comfort zone that was more of a prison, and that I preferred to try and fail than to keep wondering what would have happened. The move was simple. Robert didn't have many things. A few boxes of clothes, some books, old photographs, and a special box that contained all the letters Elizabeth had written him when they were young, the ones her family sent back, unopened, but which he had saved for years. He asked me if it bothered me that he brought them, if it made me uncomfortable that he kept those memories. "It doesn't bother me," I told him honestly. "Elizabeth was an important part of your life. I'm not going to ask you to erase that. I'm not competing with her memory. I'm grateful to her, because her love for you and your love for her brought me here. They taught me that true love exists, and they gave me the chance to experience it myself." Robert hugged me tight. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he said. "But thank you. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for not being afraid of a past I can't change." The first night Robert slept in my house was strange and wonderful at the same time. We ate dinner together. We watched television. And when it was time for bed, there was a moment of awkwardness. We hadn't talked about sleeping together, about sharing a bed. We were older. Our bodies weren't what they used to be. Our expectations were different. But when we turned off the lights and lay down, he simply took my hand. And that's how we fell asleep, holding hands like two children afraid of the dark. And it was perfect, because we didn't need more than that. We just needed to know we weren't alone, that someone was there, someone who understood us, someone who accepted us with all our wounds and our scars. I woke up in the middle of the night and watched him sleep, his quiet breathing, his relaxed face, and I felt a gratitude so deep it almost hurt. Gratitude for having followed that address on the GPS. Gratitude for having been curious enough, brave enough. Gratitude for Elizabeth and her last gift. And gratitude for this man sleeping beside me. This man who had taught me that it's never too late to live again. Living with Robert turned out to be easier than I imagined. We got used to each other with surprising naturalness. He got up early and made the coffee. I made breakfast. We spent the mornings reading the newspaper together on the patio. We dedicated the afternoons to walking in the neighborhood or simply being home enjoying each other's company. And we spent the nights talking until sleep overtook us. Not everything was perfect. We had our differences. He was more organized than I was. I was more impulsive than he was. Sometimes we argued over silly things, over how to fold the towels or what temperature to set the air conditioning. But even those arguments had something beautiful about them, because they meant we were building a life together, that we were learning to compromise, to negotiate, to find a middle ground. One morning, 2 months after he moved in, Robert woke up coughing. At first I didn't pay attention to it. It was just a cough, probably a cold. But days passed and the cough didn't improve. It got worse. He tired easily. He lost his appetite. And one night as we slept, I heard him struggling to breathe. That scared me. The next morning I forced him to go to the doctor. The tests took 2 weeks, 2 weeks of uncertainty, of silent fear, of sleepless nights imagining the worst. Robert tried to stay calm, to act like nothing was wrong, but I saw the fear in his eyes. I saw how he looked at things more closely, as if he were memorizing them, preparing to say goodbye. When the results finally arrived, the doctor gave us the news with a delicacy that only made it hurt more. Lung cancer, advanced. It had probably been developing for years without symptoms. Treatment could give him a few more months, maybe a year, but it was aggressive, and at his age, his body might not withstand the chemotherapy. He had to decide: quality of life or quantity of time. We left the office in silence. We got in the car, and we sat there without saying anything. Finally, Robert spoke. "I'm not going to do the treatment," he said. "I'm not going to spend my last months feeling worse than I already do. I want to live, truly live, for all the time I have left. I want to enjoy every day with you without being sick and weak from the medicine." I wanted to argue. I wanted to convince him to fight, to try anything that could give him more time. But when I looked into his eyes, I understood. He had waited a lifetime. He had suffered 40 years of loneliness. And now that he had finally found peace, he wasn't going to waste his last months in hospitals and painful treatments. He was going to live, and I was going to be by his side. "It's okay," I said, taking his hand. "We'll do it your way. We'll live every day as if it were a gift. Because it is. And when the time comes, I'll be with you. You won't be alone. I promise you." Robert squeezed my hand, tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for not forcing me to fight a battle I don't want to fight. Thank you for simply being here." The following months were the most intense of my life. Knowing that time was limited, every moment became precious. We did all the things we had planned. We went to the beach, something neither of us had done in years. We sat on the sand watching the ocean for hours, feeling the sun on our skin, listening to the waves, living fully. We visited nearby towns neither of us knew. We ate at new restaurants. We tried foods we had never tried. We bought ice cream and ate it walking through the park like children. We went to the theatre, the museum, concerts. We did everything Robert's body allowed. And when he was too tired to go out, we stayed home, watching movies, reading, simply being together. Every Sunday we still went up to the Overlook, even when Robert could barely walk, even when he had to stop every few steps to catch his breath. He insisted on going. "This place is sacred," he would tell me. "I loved Elizabeth here. I met you here. My life gained meaning here. I want to keep coming until I can't anymore." And so we did. Until the last Sunday he could make it up. That day, sitting in our favorite spot, Robert told me something I will never forget. "Eleanor," he said, "I want you to know that these last months have been the happiest of my life. Yes, I loved Elizabeth with all my soul. And yes, I waited for her for decades. But what I have with you is different. It's real. It's present. It's complete. And I wouldn't trade a single day of this time together for anything in the world." I cried when I heard him say that, because I felt the same way. These months with Robert had been more meaningful than entire years of my previous life. He had taught me to truly live, to feel deeply, not to be afraid of love just because it comes with the possibility of loss. Love always comes with that possibility, but it is worth it. It is always worth it. There came a point when Robert could no longer get out of bed. His body was finally giving up. I hired a nurse to come during the day, but the nights were mine. I lay down next to him. I held his hand. I talked to him about our memories, about the things we had lived together. I read him his favorite books. I put on soft music, and he smiled. Even in pain, he smiled. One night, Marilyn came to visit us. She brought my son with her. They sat around Robert's bed, and he told them stories of his youth, of Elizabeth. of how he had met his dead mother-in-law, of how she had been the love of his life, but I had been his redemption. My son cried. He didn't know that men close to 80 years old could love like that, with such intensity, with such purity. Before leaving, my son hugged me. "Mum," he said, "I'm sorry I doubted this. I'm sorry I didn't understand from the beginning. What you two have is special. It's rare, and I feel lucky to have witnessed it. You taught me that it's never too late for love, that you should never give up." Those words gave me peace, because they meant that what Robert and I shared hadn't just changed us. It had touched others too. It had inspired. The last week was the hardest. Robert slept most of the time. When he was awake, he could barely speak, but his eyes said everything. When he looked at me, I saw gratitude, love, peace, and I tried to return that same look, to tell him without words that it had been worth it, that I would do it again, that I didn't regret anything. The last night, I lay down next to him as always. I whispered in his ear, "I love you, Robert. Thank you for teaching me to live again. Thank you for showing me that love can come at any time, at any age. Thank you for choosing me." He weakly squeezed my hand, and with an effort that must have cost him everything, he murmured, "Eleanor, my Eleanor, see you soon." He fell asleep with his hand in mine, and at some point in the early morning, his breathing stopped. It was quiet, peaceful, without pain. I stayed there, lying next to him until the sun came up, crying, thanking him, saying goodbye. And when I finally got up, I knew I had changed forever, that I would never again be the empty woman I was before. Because Robert had taught me something invaluable. He had taught me that living is worth it, always. The funeral was small, intimate, only the people who truly knew him. Marilyn spoke. My son spoke. And I spoke too. I told everyone how a GPS with a mysterious address had led me to the love of my life, how a dead woman had conspired from beyond the grave to unite two lonely souls, how Robert had saved me without even knowing it, and how our time together, though brief, had been enough. It had been everything. After the funeral, Marilyn gave me something. A letter. It was from Robert. He had written it weeks before he died, and had asked her to give it to me afterwards. With trembling hands, I opened it, and I read his last words to me. Words of love, of gratitude, of hope. And on the last line, a request. "Keep living, Eleanor. Not for me, for you, because you deserve every day of happiness you can find, and because now you know how. I love you, always." The first days after Robert's death were the darkest. I woke up expecting to see him beside me, and found the bed empty. I made coffee for two out of habit, and then remembered I was alone again. The house felt too big, too quiet, and for a moment I feared falling back into that emptiness I had lived in for 5 years, that place where I only existed without truly living. But something was different this time. The pain I felt wasn't the same dull, grey pain I had felt when my husband died. This pain was sharp, intense, alive, and although it hurt, it also reminded me that I had loved, that I had felt, that I had lived something real and deep, and that, in a strange way, gave me comfort, because it meant that Robert had left a mark on me, a mark that would never be erased. Marilyn came to see me every couple of days. She brought me food. She sat with me. She let me cry without trying to comfort me with empty words. She was just there, and her presence was enough. One day she brought me a box. "This was in my mother's things," she told me. "I think you'll want to see it." I opened the box and inside I found a photo album. Photos of Elizabeth and Robert when they were young, at the Overlook, smiling, hugging, in love. I cried looking at those photos, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, because those images showed me something beautiful. They showed me that their love had been real, that it had been worth it, and that even though they couldn't be together, even though life separated them for decades, they found each other again in the end. And that ending, though brief, had been enough. It had been everything they needed. On the last page of the album, there was a different photo. It was recent. Elizabeth and Robert at the Overlook. Both old, both tired, but with the same smiles they had in the photos of their youth. Marilyn told me that she had taken that photo the last day her mother saw Robert, the day of the goodbye, and seeing them like that, together one last time, broke and healed my heart at the same time. Weeks passed, then months. The pain didn't disappear, but it became more manageable. I learned to live with it, to carry it as part of me. And slowly I started going out again, walking in the park, having coffee with neighbours, accepting invitations I would have rejected before. Because I remembered Robert's letter, his request that I keep living, and I wasn't going to disappoint him. One Sunday, 6 months after his death, I took the car keys, the same car I had bought from Elizabeth, the same car that had that mysterious address that had changed my life, and I drove to the Overlook. I hadn't been there since Robert died. I was afraid it would be too painful. But something was calling me to that place. Something told me it was time to go back. When I arrived, the place was exactly as I remembered it. The wooden railing, the tall trees, the infinite horizon. I walked up to the spot where Robert used to stand, where he had waited for 40 years, where he had told me his story, where we had fallen in love. And I stood there, feeling the wind on my face, listening to the silence of the mountain. "Hello, Robert," I said out loud. "Hello, Elizabeth. Thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for teaching me that love exists, that it's worth the risk, that it's never too late." Tears streamed down my face, but I was smiling, because I knew that wherever they were finally together, finally free, finally at peace. I sat down on the ground, in the same place where Robert and I had sat so many times, and I took a notebook out of my bag. I had started writing, documenting our story, the story of how an address on a GPS led me to love, how two lonely people found each other in the most unexpected place, how we learned that it's never too late to live again. I was writing for myself, to process, to remember. But I was also writing with the hope that someone else would read it someday, someone who was lost like I was, someone who needed to know that there is always hope. I spent hours up there that day, writing, remembering, crying and laughing at the same time. And when the sun began to set, I closed the notebook. I stood up, and I spoke to the horizon one last time. "I'm going to live, Robert, just like you asked. I'm going to live every day I have left. For me, for you, for Elizabeth, for everyone who didn't get the chance we had." I came down the mountain with a heart lighter than it had been in months. And when I got home, instead of closing myself off, I went out. I walked around the neighborhood, I greeted people, I accepted a dinner invitation from a neighbor, and that night, for the first time since Robert died, I went to sleep without that crushing weight on my chest. I went to sleep with hope. The following months were a transformation. I joined a book club. I started painting classes, something I had always wanted to do but had never dared. I traveled alone for the first time in my life. I went to the town where Elizabeth was born. I visited the places she and Robert had loved, and in every place I felt their presence. I felt like they were guiding me, encouraging me to keep going. I met new people. I made friends, women my age who were also learning to live again after loss. We got together on Thursdays for tea and shared stories. And I told them mine, the story of the GPS, the Overlook, Robert and Elizabeth. And they all cried. They all told me it was the most beautiful story they had ever heard, that it gave them hope, that it reminded them that it's never too late. A year after Robert's death, I went back to the Overlook. This time I didn't go alone. I took Marilyn. I took my children. I took my friends from the book club. And there, in front of that infinite horizon, I read the entire story aloud. Everything I had written, everything I had lived. And when I finished, everyone was crying. But they were good tears, tears of hope, of inspiration, of gratitude. Marilyn hugged me tight. "Thank you, Eleanor," she told me. "Thank you for loving Robert. Thank you for honoring my mother's memory. Thank you for proving that love has no age, that it's never too late to start over." My son hugged me too. "I'm proud of you, Mum," he said. "You taught me more in these last 2 years than in my whole life. You taught me to be brave, not to be afraid to feel, to truly live." Those words filled me with a deep joy, because they meant that my story hadn't just changed me, it had touched others. It had inspired. It had taught. And that was exactly what Elizabeth had wanted. That's why she had left that address on the GPS. Not just so Robert would know she loved him until the end, but to create a chain of love, of hope, of transformation. Today, Yibiji, I am 65 years old. 2 years have passed since I bought that car. 2 years since I followed my curiosity to a mountain. 2 years since I met Robert. And even though he is gone, his impact on my life remains immense. He changed me. He saved me. He taught me to live. I am no longer the empty woman who only existed. Now I am someone who lives fully, who feels deeply, who is not afraid to take risks, who knows that love can arrive at any time, at any age, in any form, and that it always, always is worth it. I still go up to the Overlook every Sunday. It's my ritual, my way of honoring Robert and Elizabeth, my way of reminding myself that I must keep living. And every time I'm up there, looking at that infinite horizon, I feel like they are with me, guiding me, protecting me, reminding me that life is a gift, that every day counts, that it's never too late. And if I could give one piece of advice to anyone reading this, to anyone who feels lost, empty, resigned, I would tell you this: follow your curiosity, dare to explore, dare to feel, because you never know where a simple saved address on a GPS can lead you. You never know what story is waiting for you at the end of the road. You never know when life is going to give you a second chance. And when that opportunity comes, take it. Don't be afraid. Don't hesitate. Don't settle for just existing. Live completely. Live without regrets. Because in the end, the only thing that matters is the love you gave and the love you received. The experiences you lived, the people you touched, and the moments you dared to fully feel. This was my story, the story of how a mysterious address led me to love, led me to myself, led me to the life I should have been living all along. And I hope my story inspires you to seek your own, to follow your own path, to dare to truly live, because we all deserve that opportunity. We all deserve love. We all deserve to feel alive. Regardless of age, regardless of the past, regardless of anything, it's never too late. Remember that. It's never too late.